Hello and welcome to Roll on the Adventure. In this episode, we're going to be doing the post-mortem of Conspiracy Board, the game wherein we tried having 3 GMs and 1 player and doing everything online and seeing how well that worked, which seemed to be fairly well. But we'll get into the intro and then we'll keep discussing it. So let's assault your eardrums with some of our beautiful singing again.
Roll on the adventure. Roll on the adventure.
Ooh, that was a bit different.
Yes, that was.
I don't know. I'm just feeling a bit of a sultry mood this evening.
Cool. So, the 2 games that we played. Obviously, Amy, you weren't in both of them, but
nope.
Okay, the first one with Ivan Lovelace. Any thoughts on that? I thought that went incredibly well. I think we nailed a lot of the sort of spy genre stuff.
Yeah. No, I think there's something about a bit of a concern of anything that is almost entirely mechanics free that you'd be like, wait, I have to improv all of this? Oh no, but it was actually like super chill, to be honest. Maybe we're just all in pretty good headspace to do improv heavy games, so it fits us very well as players. I know that if I put that game in front of some of the other people I play games with, they would just scream and cry. But not all games are for all people. But yeah, I agree. Yeah. We nailed that first one.
Yeah. Are there any particular moments that you think stood out?
I think there was a point where all of us were hit a point where we're all just like, yeah, where this is going. Yeah. No, we're super into it. Jolt Cola is robot fuel, absolutely. And then once we all kind of unspokenly decided that was what we'd focus on, it then took it to like the next level, I think.
I don't think we had that moment quite in the other game. What do you guys think?
Not necessarily. I'm willing to say that is possibly my fault. I was like thinking really hard as a GM, how can I work in the Port Authority into the bits and pieces I was weaving, and was annoyingly coming up with a blank, so I didn't end up integrating my bits as well as I would have liked to. How we still ended that, I think, was really cool, and the places it went was really cool. But I apologize for not as being on my A game.
To be fair, I had a bit of a weird time with that one as well, because I decided to try a different strategy and do like the sort of all or nothing kind of voting. And I think it took me out of the sort of headspace of constantly coming up with stuff, because in parts I was sort of sitting back and seeing what other people came up with for the next scene, or I was starting a scene with no real intention of taking the next one.
You think you were getting too gamey with it?
I possibly was, and I can't think of a good way of reducing that.
Yeah, because I must admit, as a player, I noticed that was what your strategy was the all or nothing. And that was a bit unfortunate in some ways, because I really loved your plot strands, but it's the kind of thing that you would have to have done 2 scenes in a row to really capitalize on.
Yeah, with that, I could have gone and done 2 scenes in a row and just burnt through a load of points. But I felt like that would, like with the hand thing, for instance, I felt like not letting someone else take it after that was a bit like hogging the game. Sure.
Because you set up a juicy plot thread for somebody else to try and run with in a different direction, which I think is a good thing. You know,
I don't know if it kind of paid off. As Amy was saying, it might have been better if I'd have kept going. But like I say, that strategy of I know I'm not taking the next scene gives me a bit of freedom here. I don't know if that was productive or not.
That might be appropriate for longer games, because bearing in mind that all the games that we run in this like experimental format is within the time period we're allowed for the show. So there was a point where I was expecting, actually, because I'm bad at keeping track of time, that there would be at least one additional round of suggestion before we went into the finale.
Yeah, I was hoping we could get one in, but we did some really nice roleplay scenes, and unfortunately, that takes a bit longer.
We're just too good at what we do. What a curse to have. What a curse to have. But yeah, I think in a game where there isn't that kind of time limit, not voting, I think, is fair, because people are going to be spending fewer points per round, and there's going to be more rounds. So people are probably going to be playing within the realms of like 0 to 3, rather than we were playing in the realms of like 3 to 7 per round, because we had to kind of chunk through the points that we had.
Sometimes you'll just come up blank as well of, I can't think of anything for this scene.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw 0 in.
To be honest, though, I think the whole people coming up blanks having a Scrabble for something, especially in the second game, because we were a bit more like conscious of where we could put the sort of crux points. I think because we talked about it and we were thinking about like crux points, sometimes I think the scenes took people by surprise when a crux point came up. It wasn't the obvious one.
Sure.
I certainly saw that a couple of times. I was like, ooh, that's the crux point. And that made me scrabble for stuff. And I did notice that it seemed like when people were doing that, those were the things that got picked quite a lot. So I think that might actually be quite a good... That scrabbling for ideas actually worked out quite well.
I think so.
But I don't think it'd work as well with the votes, because then the player doesn't get to pick. And I think that lets the player eliminate bad options, like ones that aren't interesting, where someone's just said something because they have to and kind of drawn a blank.
Sure. Yeah. I guess this the game automatically gives its own kind of difficulty level depending on the people playing. I think people who go into this game who are used to doing improv and are kind of willing to like challenge themselves on the front of coming up with something, a juicy plot hook on the fly, will probably be playing this game with the more unexpected turning points. Whereas if you're having a bit more of a longer, chiller game, you might be letting a scene kind of play out to the point where everybody's like, okay, there's nothing in the scene we have left to explore, rather than being like, right, we need to keep moving to the next bit. So, depending what kind of pace you want to play the game. I think initially when we were kind of talking about the design of this game, and we were thinking of the dividing line between like the talky psychological spy movies and the high octane action spy movies, and this game could feasibly do both, but I don't think at the same time. You kind of have to decide whether you're going to kind of let scenes play out maximally with lots of talking, or whether we're going to be kind of like, there's going to be a car chase and then a fight scene and then a moody scene at the docks and so on.
Yeah. I think that when we tried this with the more detective angle, it didn't quite work quite as well with the longer scenes, but I think part of that was definitely our time constraint.
Sure.
I found the first one, I don't know how much is just kind of my genre knowledge and stuff, but I did find the first one where it was more kind of the teeny action side, easier to fill in and think of things for, than the second one, which was more investigation-y type.
Yeah, that's something I found was the second, though I obviously wasn't in the first one, the second one took on a lot more of a detective angle than a spy angle. I think that was partially because of the theme I chose, because you don't see many noir spies, you see a lot of noir detectives.
I think part of the problem I had on occasion when thinking of things in the second one was that Cassandra would have known a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so you can't throw a surprise in because there's no reason the character wouldn't know that. And I found that was kind of made it a bit harder.
Do you have an example of that?
So if I was trying to introduce something down at the barge area.
Sure.
And I went for the hand guy in the end. I didn't really know what to do there because I thought most of the people that she's going to run into, she'd have an understanding of what they were doing. And I find it harder to work within those constraints than I do to come up with something completely new often.
Okay. Yeah, I see.
Whereas I think there was a lot more freedom on occasion in the first one.
I guess that is the kind of I'm glad that we tried both tones.
Yeah.
Actually, to be honest, I quite like playing conspiracy board as a noir. I'm like personally more of a sucker for stories that are on a micro level rather than a macro one. So having the kind of like different factions and stuff be as small scale as local police or the local mafia rather than literally all of the US government tickles my brain in a bit way of being like, I can see this is, maybe it's just because it's smaller scale, it's something that I can understand as an individual.
I think you could definitely do without having it be noir though. So for example, you could have a different scenario where the spy is a delinquent at school and the factions they're dealing with are like the principals, the prefects, the bullies. You can definitely have micro settings without having noir, which I think is a more difficult thing to do spies with than it would be to do detectives.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah, basically Brick. If you've ever seen that movie, it's literally a noir, but just done as a American high school.
I was going to say I'd love to do Veronica Mars in Conspiracy Board. That would be great.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking in that case is that if you're doing noir with it, you kind of need a big unknown that everybody agrees is new.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to do that with the auction, but then we later established that the auction had been going on a few years. So I wasn't, after that, I was a little bit lost as to what the new thing was. Hence why I was trying to get the Stetson hat guys in there.
And to your credit, it integrated. It definitely made sense. I don't think there was a point where through play we got to a point where like, actually none of this makes sense. It all flowed reasonably, even if it wasn't going in the same kind of direction as the last session.
I think I definitely felt it more work though.
It is going to be a bit of a danger or potential issue with the kind of more improv-y side of things, of if somebody throws something in and then 10 minutes later somebody else suddenly goes, wait, that doesn't make... We didn't have anything like that, but it's always a danger when you are basically just riffing, going go into places or collapse under its own weight.
I think then maybe some advice about, like, if you're doing a spy one, there needs to be some quite big upheaval. Sorry. I'm not quite sure where to go on the noir thing, because that's more of like a focused mystery.
Sure. And it's hard to write a mystery alone, so it's even harder to write a mystery with 3 people. Fair enough.
Yeah, I think though, saying what area the mystery is going to be in,
to
even
kind of call some shots in
answers.
advance. Sure.
Yeah, to call, like, I think that should be like part of the pre-briefing almost.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we went for the Johnny Cash records, but we didn't really say what one or two of the big questions might be. And I think if we'd have discussed that, we might have, even if we're not given answers, we'd at least have some idea of what other people were wanting to learn.
Yeah. I guess this is to feed it into, having looked at your docket beforehand, into the integration of Trello with the system. Trello is pretty neat in terms of being able to have all that information handy, so you never really forget a detail. But I kind of was like, at what point should I, as a GM, or I, as a player, link information or make a new thing?
Yeah,
because that's not really set out in the rules. And like, I guess to say out loud, oh, So in each loop, make sure you write X number of cards or have X mysteries that are open at the start of play feels very rigid, but I think those are good as effective springboards to make sure that you have enough groundwork.
Yeah, we did it with the number of things to include, but I think giving some targets would be nice. Say we expect at least one new, like 2 new cards and 1 new like link at least, or 1 unanswered question to come out of each scene. We want 2 bits of new information and 1 lingering question, quite possibly.
I think that might be good guidance to then put into the document itself to help people who are improving this to give them a guidance of, you want stuff everyone else can riff off of.
Yeah. Even if it is just kind of like saying, for the first 3 GM narrations or the first 2 GM narrations, make sure that over the course of the scene, another open question is added to the player board, just so then you're guaranteed additional bits to kind of work from. Because otherwise, I'd forget like getting too into what the back and forth of having everybody in the scene. I am the kind of person who would entirely forget to add an additional mystery because I'm too busy exploring the ones we've already set. So that would help me.
Yeah. Okay, I did notice that the whole GM briefing discussion bit isn't particularly well established in the rules. I think that's definitely a thing that should be happening.
I think that should be something that's co-typed in the game. Actually, I was very surprised when I took up the thing of like, oh, I'll give the briefing, and then because mission statements are quite rigid, they're there to set a very defined goal and aim that will be followed across the entire set of play. So I wasn't actually fully comfortable improvising all of that. It's like, no, I should probably type this up or have some time to kind of write down what I think I actually want to say, lest in trying to ramble for time while I think up of additional things, say an entirely other thing that makes no sense to me or anybody else. So kind of having the opportunity, even cooperatively between the GMs, to actually write down what the briefing is and then decide for somebody to give it, I think would help the start be a little stronger.
To break the curtain a little bit, the reason that I did push to talk about it rather than write it is mostly a podcast thing. That's why I said, let's send Amy away and let's have a talk about it, instead of, have we got enough stuff on the GM board yet? Let's add some more, because that's not going to make particularly great listening.
You can edit out the discussion of the briefing in post. That's fine. But yes.
Yeah, that was kind of intentional. I'm more wondering if that's worth making a rule, because it was kind of handy. But if you're thinking that you would have liked to have had more written down, I think then definitely not to do that, not to cut that bit.
No, I do think it's useful to, or at least because of the way that I don't write large amounts of notes when I GM, but I tend to make sure I have all the important information in eyeline, because I will immediately forget names and places and objectives unless I'm constantly reminded. So I prefer writing things down. So that might be, an optional thing to suggest of like, hey, if you're the kind of person who can't keep a mystery in their head, which
I think that the writing it down should be the default. And the sort of, what we did and just chat about it and then just keep it in your head. That should be the, maybe this is better for your group option. And the writing, getting stuff down on the board for later reuse is probably better as the default. Because I've had a lot of practice keeping like a year's worth of campaign in my head, and just winging it. And not a lot of people have done that, partly because it's insane.
No. If I was running something that long, I would absolutely write down most things.
I've done like 30-week campaigns on about 6-7 pages of notes.
All right. Okay.
I don't actually get my notes out for most of my Exalted sessions. I just make a couple of like scribbles afterwards, just because I've done the setting that many times.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's something that you can learn. It's really awkward, and it's a bit of a mess.
Mm-hmm. Why would you have to? If you want to, that's great, but you don't have to.
Exactly.
For mysteries in particular, where details can matter more, you don't want to actually end up going, so-and-so was here, when you've also said they were somewhere else, and the players end up going, clearly there's a double.
Mm-hmm.
See, usually I'd just ask the players, but you can't do that in this game.
Yeah. That was, I think that actually directly came up in, because also to part the curtain how we played the game, initially when we were writing about what the kind of like MacGuffin would be for Cassandra to chase after, I initially wrote down like a wooden puzzle box with something interesting inside. And then we rejigged that into the box of Johnny Cash records. And I like typed over that previous card, so replaced it with a new one.
Yeah.
And then the wooden puzzle box came up again anyway, and I was like, oh, all right. I mean, yes, and so absolutely, that's another important thing there. I'm also going to add the Necronomicon to the things that are at this auction.
Oh my god!
I did like that when that came in. Yeah.
That was me filling for air, admittedly. I was like, yeah, he's the kind of person who likes rare books. What's a rare book that you know, Nathan?
Necronomicon.
That one.
Yeah.
Which is totally out of genre for what we were doing, actually. I really shouldn't have done that. But
to be honest, that was my inspiration for taking it like the last sort of scene that I did.
To a horror angle.
It did, yeah. Because as soon as you said that, I was like, oh man, the Stetson hat guys took on a completely different sort of main after that.
Mm-hmm.
Before they were like the bad guy and like the woman in the lab coat, you know, they were like kind of these implaceable machines.
But no, they were just all American cultists now.
Yeah, and I went, definitely taking this down the psychic angle, which I wasn't gonna do. And it was like it was basically a wizard and a pair of ghouls at the end. And I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't have mentioned the Necronomicon.
I mean, I definitely did enjoy the Stetson hat guys at the very end. Like that was incredible the way it ended.
Oh man, the bit afterwards with the post credits and that caught me completely off guard, and I loved it. Right, so the 3 GMs and the player choice thing. As a mechanic, I really enjoyed the GMs put forward things and the player gets to decide. I thought that worked amazingly.
Yeah, that's rad. I've said it a handful of times, I'll say it again. I love the subversion of usually the GM decides things and the players have to be like, well, okay, I guess that's our reality now. And instead the players go like, no. I want this one. This one's better.
And I think the only thing that I would change on that is, well, I wouldn't change how it works. What I might want to do is have a bit more advice on how much to reveal. Because if you looked at, say, what I was saying, I was like, here's the gist, here's a vague gist of it. Here's how this thing immediately goes, and what happens after then is a cool secret for you to find out. Whereas Demetrius was expounding quite a lot of the plot details that he was going to introduce, and Chris was somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think having a bit of guidance on that would probably be pretty good. What do you guys think? Like, where do we kind of pitch that?
It would probably be useful to have guidance along the lines of what you pitch should be no more than a few sentences. Because I tend to be quite rambly.
I reckon a sentence is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even just the fact that what you pitch should just be the hook. It's the first sentence in the paragraph.
Yeah, the hook. That's a really good way of phrasing it.
The hook, or the people in the TV design development biz tend to call it the top line, the bit that is the juicy idea. So yeah, the hook is definitely a good one. Top line also works. They're all within the kind of giving it a TV/script writing term. I think is really appropriate. In the same way that we.
I mean, that's what this game sort of reminds me of. It's literally you're sitting in the writer's room, but it's like one of your characters came to life and can start writing with you. That's what this game gives me the feeling of.
Oh, cool.
I was thinking more like choose your own adventures, but yeah, similar idea.
They're both really cool analogies. Yeah. So, do you reckon that we could lift some of those ideas that we used for the player choice thing? Well, that we used to manage the 3GMs, the sort of bidding on scenes, that kind of thing. Do you reckon we could hoist those out and use them for other games? Do you think it'd be interesting?
There is, at least at its most at the easiest version possible, a really good hack of Fiasco. Not like a playset where there's just kind of like, the different settings and everything, but an actual mechanical hack of because that was a bit of an influence in our design in the first place, and I think that can probably be fed back in to make. Having played Fiasco recently, one of the things that people kind of go stum on really quickly is all kind of like, what scene do you want to do? And then they just go like, oh man, I don't know, dang. But if it was a kind of thing where the other three players suggest a thing as a way to go, and then letting you kind of choose that option, that's pretty cool. Games, I'm sure you've all other played like narrative focused or more narrative heavy games with plot points as a mechanic in them, where you can spend one to change the story in a way beyond your own character's means. I would definitely play a version of, say, Shadowrun Anarchy, where spending a plot point gets a suggestion from everybody else on the table about a dramatic thing that happens, and then you pick one.
I could also see like having some sort of like hook in a more traditional campaign where you solicit things from the players.
I think it would definitely work. Like my standby system for most games is Fated and Fate Accelerated, which both work heavily on the concept of players interacting with each other. Having this concept in those sort of games could be incredibly interesting, because as it stands, a lot of the time people don't know what each other's aspects are, the things that they can use to influence the other players. So if you have something more overt like this, where it says like, if you spend a fate point, or if you spend like 3 fate points, you can suddenly say, oh, how about this? That would be an interesting way to have DMing become a more cooperational type of activity. So I definitely think it's an interesting concept.
It also helps obviously get players more involved and engaged with the game, because rather than some goons kick down the door, you don't really know who they are. The players go, or one of the players goes, some Serpent Fang goons kick down the door, because that's obviously something they want to see. Which, it's the kind of thing that helps you do it in a way a bit more transparent to the game than just going, I don't know what to do. You guys throw some suggestions in.
Yeah.
The door gets kicked in. Who's on the other side? Take the point, and whoever. I suppose the victory, in a way, for the person that got picked in our game was getting to narrate the next bit. Whereas I think if you did it from a player side, you'd probably need to reward with, say, a fate point or something.
Yeah. I guess this is. I was thinking about these examples are very in the kind of narrative focused games where players are okay with failing or making their own lives harder. Which I think is a good thing in general. I think that's a good kind of attitude to kind of take into any tabletop RPGs, being willing to lose and make that fun. But thinking about applying that into tabletop systems where winning is important, like say D&D or any kind of game with like, or Shadowrun, or any kind of game like core Shadowrun, the maths version.
Oh yeah. I would not try this thing called Shadowrun.
Well, one of the things that I've kind of run into, like headspace wise, is playing those kind of systems where what is about to happen has already been written down in a document in advance. Usually, anyway. Obviously, there are people that can do it off the dome, but as a player who likes to improv, being like, is this the point where this cool thing happens? And then they look at me stone in the face and be like, you don't know that. You can't suggest what could happen here. That's not how this game works. And the system of everybody being able to suggest a rad thing at key moments would utterly destroy how those games work, but make me like them infinitely more.
Can you imagine, Core Shadow, and you just drop in you run into a new person, and you just drop in an edge point to trigger a round of suggestions to the GM.
Yeah, it's like, I know you've written down an encounter of what this guy has, but I'm going to suggest this guy has a flamethrower because I think that's cool. And then everybody else around the table gets it, yeah, flamethrowers, and the GM just sweats.
I don't know.
I'm a terrible player.
It's probably less bad than him having a water pistol.
Also a good suggestion.
Oh, man. Right, so the genre emulation aspect, we've already kind of touched on that.
Yeah, that's rad. Love it.
Yeah, I think it did well on the spy. I think it did less well on the detective, but that was partly because we tried to use the spy setup. And we might want, I think that's like a mini hack almost.
Yeah. A version of the game that opens itself up to any genre where one person is influenced by multiple factions is neat, because you could take that to, I don't know, like space opera, where you are the captain of SS generic, but there are lots of other like empires and stuff trying to get you to do things.
Yeah, or maybe like a freelancer or something.
Yeah. But there are probably definitely some of the things we've set are definitely in the realms of spy. I guess the kind of secrecy of plans and stuff feels very spy, right? Where other genres, the warring factions are probably going to be a little more open about what they're doing. Because if it's pulpy, they don't need to hide anything. They're fully willing to be kind of really overt in what they're about to do. But
I think having some of it be secret from the player, like some bits, but not a lot, would be quite interesting. But yeah, I could very much see stacking a lot more stuff onto the playboard, like that hasn't necessarily come up in the scene, but is peripheral to it.
Yeah.
Like say, this makes sense. What this guy's doing makes sense if the other empire is posturing. So I'm going to put up the other empire posturing on the player board. Whereas with the detective genre, you might want to do more linking on the player board. Like really aggressively link stuff and go, this guy knows this guy, and you know that.
Connecting them facts. Got to do the legwork.
Yeah, but like doing the legwork for the player in some respects.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that makes the process faster, right?
Yeah.
Because if this was like a gumshoe-based system, where they then have to connect the dots themselves, and it's slower. Not necessarily slow in a bad way, just the game designed to be slower paced than what Conspiracy Board is. Because I think even if you took your time with the little narrations, Conspiracy Board is quite a quick game.
I think it's because in Gumshoe, the player's supposed to have more control. Whereas the player doesn't have, the player has control, but the character doesn't.
Yeah.
Is the assumption with Conspiracy Board, whereas the assumption with Gumshoe is that the player has quite a decent measure of control over what they're doing and where they're going. And what they choose to do,
Characters are normally quite competent and very good, whereas in Conspiracy Board, because it's purely down to the narration, you could very easily have somebody that's
a mess,
Johnny English style, where they technically get results, but their competence level is terrible.
I was definitely going to play it that way if I was the player.
Sure. I was torn about that.
Yeah, I was probably going to play like a 30-year-old like computer programmer who's like happens to know some people and has got in way over their head and has no clue what they're doing.
The Laundry series, I forget the proper name. There's a bunch of like sci-fi novels written, or like urban fantasy novels written by Charles Strauss.
Yeah, the Laundry Files.
Yeah, there we go. I wasn't entirely off base. Whereas it's kind of like incidentally there.
Yeah. I was going to go more like actual real world spies route. You know, like people that get recruited in the field and aren't professional spies.
Sure.
That's where I was going to go with it. I'd like to see how that worked out.
But
I did really enjoy the Cassandra game.
Oh gosh, yes. I'm down for any like badass noir lady in most media. That's entirely fine.
I think it was there was some interesting sort of parallels in tone, and there was also some really interesting differences, which I really liked.
I did like the very different tones between the two. How the second one was, well, obviously very noir, and the violence was kind of a lot visceral,
more poignant. Yes,
yeah.
She pulls a gun, and I'm like, wow, okay. And this is in the UK as well. She mean business.
Yeah.
Whereas the first one was kind of people being knocked around, and they could be dead, they could be unconscious. It's not particularly relevant. Let's just move on.
I think it's part of that was because of what we'd established about Ivan, though. Cassandra, at least to my mind, was always like baseline human, whereas
Ivan
was as not human as we managed to narrate and sell Nathan on.
Which was, I don't know, I was entirely into just being kind of like, misunderstood android boy, so precious, so addicted to Jolt Cola. To raise a point about the kind of like incompetence within narrative intentionally, where he then faces down another android and is just like, I know what to do. I'm just going to throw some coke in her face and run. That works.
That went rather well. So are there any things that you think didn't particularly work? Or looking through the rules, are there any things you think we just didn't do? Because if there was I noticed that in Primordia there were a couple of rules that we didn't really engage with. That I'm not sure if we actually cut out in the end, because it's easy to find things that don't work, but it's kind of less easy to find things you don't use. So does anything jump out at people for that?
I think it's just having more codified establishments of doing things, of reminding you in a bit more of a prominent way to link information in an obvious manner. And I admit part of that is down to me trying to do it in Trello and then flubbing up how that's supposed to do. And I was like, I'm just not going to link anything. Fuck it, it's fine. But for a reminder of, I guess if this version of the document, it might do to have an additional page, even if it's a separate PDF, that is like, here is how to Trello. So when you do it in this system, these are the specific things that you need to click on to make it work the way that you need it to.
Yeah. I'm not really seeing anything that we definitely didn't do.
Yeah, I think the only thing we didn't do a lot of was when it would be someone's scene, like they had won the bid and it was their scene. But in the rules, it sort of says to try and bring the other two people in or more who didn't get in to voice characters or do little things. We did do it in the second story towards the very end, where you
didn't do a lot of it in general.
Yes, so possibly, because that is a bit of a slippery road there. Having done improv scenarios where you let other people do things, it can go one of two ways: either brilliantly well or very, very poorly.
Yeah.
So I reckon it's because of the speed of the scene. and the sort of like bite-sized nature of everything, a lot of it was quite isolated. We didn't end up with like 3 people in a room talking at pretty much any point.
No, I think in both games we were definitely in an entirely different location each scene, which I think is working as intended.
Yeah, I think the only time we really did that was when we had the Jimmy and the lady. It was Timmy, wasn't it? The janitor.
Timmy's the janitor.
Yeah, we had Timmy and the security lady, and that was the only time we really had like multiple characters like that at the same time. Apart from in montages and like the little bit with the bartender when there was like people in the background and stuff, but not a lot else.
I'm wondering then if it might do well to codify something like what did happen in the second episode with the last scene, where you like explicitly everyone was brought in. It might be good to have something like that in the finale scene. Everyone should be brought in, though one person is directing, because I think that means everyone is involved in the finale.
It is codified in there for the finale.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I do remember that being something that was written down.
For the end game one, it's there's this line about getting the other informants involved.
Even if it's just to answer questions about their faction, yeah.
Though that was actually, that wasn't the scene that we did that for. That was actually the office scene where you did get Nathan involved, because Chris took that and got Nathan in on that. And I think we did do that on the scene before, but it probably would be worth it.
It feels maybe a little tropey to suggest, but then this is like a genre game, so maybe tropes are fine. But suggesting that the end game involves, because that line is about, even if it's just to answer questions about their faction, that suggests that other members of the faction are there in the end game scene, and maybe that needs to be codified, as in there is always not necessarily literally a Mexican standoff, but all the players are drawn to the final scene.
I don't know. I think that's we tended to do that as like the kind of like the debrief. I think we got kind of confused a bit as to where the actual end of the game, like the last scene ends and the end game and debrief begin, which is kind of interesting.
It's always going to be a bit awkward for structure and things because it's all very improv and can go all sorts of different ways. You don't really want to give firm guidelines for you must have everyone reunite at the end, because you could have a story where one entire faction has died off scene before or something. There's all sorts of pointers you could give, but at that point it starts becoming very open-ended of try and do this, try and do that, and quite how precise you want it to be. As I say, it's going to be quite hard to codify in rules. I would have thought it would just be guidelines and pointers.
Yeah, I think having like a suggestions tab would be a quite good thing to have on this document, just because to help people that don't have that experience improving.
Like things that could go wrong, standard. I mean, maybe the suggestions box stuff should be something to whack on the GM Trello.
Oh, as in, I guess the Trello also kind of exists as a cheat sheet quite handily, because the cards that give suggestions of how to make an action can be visibly there at all times.
Yeah, I did use it as a cheat sheet quite a bit. I was like, oh crap, I forgot a guy's name, just alt tab. Which is
but
nice.
I mean, mechanical cheat sheeting as well. I mean, of kind of like a, how in some RPG books they're just like, here are some tenets that the GM should bear in mind, like be a fan of your players. Having those kind of like axioms pre-installed on the Trello board, which is maybe not necessarily a mandatory thing to do, but a suggestion to kind of add to the kind of Trello board space as a column of things to be kind of like, oh yeah, these are some tenets I should bear in mind, both mechanical and role-playing, that would help the process go smoother. Because I think a lot of the times where we've faltered or ended up things haven't gelled quite as well is just because we forgot how it's supposed to go. So having the reminder of how it's supposed to go in eyeline, because I must admit, read through the PDF a number of times before playing. While playing, didn't actually look at the PDF at all, because that's too many things to keep my eyes on if I'm looking at 2 Trello boards at once.
I mean, I do flip back to it because I've got a quite good idea of what's in it, but that's mostly because I'm the one who ended up writing up the draft. So I think my experience there is a bit different, because I'll remember having written something like that and then go check it.
Sure.
Whereas I think that definitely happened quite a bit with Primordia, and I think I won't need that because I'm the one who wrote the game up.
Also, I guess because the game is entirely digital. With other tabletop systems, I would probably print something or have. I tend to have some kind of paper. Physical paper with me when I play tabletop RPGs, but because the conceit of this is something that could be done entirely over the internet, I try to kind of adhere to that idea.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which I think is, that's a reasonable way to play. The number of people who play, actual play stuff via Discord and things like that, where digital is the primary means of having all the information available. But in other games, I would have, if this game didn't come with the conceit of playing it only online, I probably would have printed the PDF and had that in front of me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know about the rest of y'all, whether you're the kind of person who mixes both physical and digital for tabletop stuff.
I've got a notepad in front of me, but that's mostly for podcast notes. I mean, I didn't really write. I tried not to write any goings down, so goings on down on that. I tried to keep it into Trello because I won't write it twice.
Sure.
Right.
I'll write it once, and I'd better off doing that on the Trello. Chris?
Yeah, I'm pretty much purely analog most of the time.
So how did you find it on this then?
Easier than trying to play more traditional games online where you're having to play around with dice rollers and various other things. Because it was only just basically the rules and 2 Trello boards, so you weren't having to like move yourself, drag your icon around on a map, or as I say, fiddle with dice rollers. It was mostly just trying to update the notes while also keeping track of what people were saying.
I think that I probably would use a Trello board for doing like other online games in the future. If I was running, say, like a one shot or something online, I might use it to organize my notes. I've been working on this Monster Hunter one, which is all about big monsters, and I think this could actually be quite good for that.
Yeah, I think in a bougier world where we had not necessarily higher production values, but I've been watching like Twitch streams and stuff where there is an additional person in the, say, Roll20 whose job it is to stream it. So it's none of the players that are doing that, and also be an additional hand to move bits and pieces around and things like that to do like screen and state keeping. And
so basically a stagehand.
Yeah. This is a game that it doesn't need a stagehand, but oh my gosh, if somebody was kind of like keeping tabs on literal tabs that you're adding to the documents, that I don't have to type it. Because I guess also because the other conceit of doing this for a podcast, in this aside from time, is that I'm trying not to type too loud, which means I'm also typing very slowly as to not go clack, 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 clack. Which means that my notes were generally a good 30 seconds behind.
Yeah, I had that. There was a couple of points where I forgot to unmute my mic because I've been typing. And it did show up.
The struggle is real.
Yeah. But I think that's partly just me not being used to it.
Yeah, we're just incredibly unprofessional. It's fine.
I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? I don't know if like having a stagehand in this would quite like seriously change the game?
No, not mechanically. Just make our lives easier.
I think it would.
It would be weird having another person's opinions on things because.
Oh, they don't need to say a goddamn thing. They're just there for the ride.
But they're basically becoming a GM. Like, they're putting truths in.
What they note down might not be what the person speaking intended to be.
But it's now true.
I see what you mean. I see what you mean. No,
and-
I guess in my head it would be more kind of me vocalizing out loud that this is a thing, that is a card that needs to exist.
They just take kind of a direct transcription rather than...
Yeah. I guess I'm also picturing in my head like Carol Vorderman on Countdown / the lady on like Wheel of Fortune who's like, the glamorous assistant. There we go. I'm definitely down for playing more tabletop RPGs if I'm allowed a glamorous assistant of my choosing. Just FYI. Just putting that into the world so other people know that's a thing.
So yeah, the thing is, there's stuff on the GM's board that doesn't get said out loud. I know, like the Rival Syndicate never really came up too much.
Yeah, we just never really talked about them at all.
Yeah.
But that's fine.
Yeah, like there's things like smugglers on there that we were gonna bring in, but it just never. Well, it only came in right at the very end that they were trying to smuggle Jolt Cola in, but it wasn't there for a long time. I was like the cheating at cards thing. That was sitting there ready for us to reuse if we needed it. And I think that having to say this out loud and let someone know to put it in the GM board
would also ruin the mystique of it all. Sure.
It'd be less cool to the player when that came back and did a callback.
That's true. I mean, I used the cheating at cards thing just to have the leader of the Straw Boater gang show up repeatedly.
Yeah.
Another badass lady, because we need two.
Yeah.
I mean, we passed the Bechdel test, right?
Oh no, they totally date in my headcanon. It's fine.
Oh my god.
Cool. And yeah, I don't think there's much else to really go over on there.
Crushed it.
Yeah. Let's take a short break and we'll get back to it.